Hi, it is me again. Let me fix this. Today, we're we're gonna continue to talk about the Marcoses, unfortunately. I feel like there is a world where maybe I might have voted for Bongbong Marcos. Maybe there's a world where like he's a person that whose platforms actually speak to me. Maybe there's a world where he actually is objectively better than the other candidates. But the one thing that really gets my goat about the Marcoses is not their lack of platform, and it's not their blatant abuse of people's lack of digital and educational literacy. It's the fact that there's just zero accountability for the history that their family is responsible for. It's one thing to be able to say, did that, me, my sister, we did that, and it's really unfortunate that we've caused so many people to suffer. So, from now on I take carriage for it and I'll try to make things better. It would be one thing if he said that, but he just pretends like it never happened, right? He just pretends like, oh, what are you talking about? People died during martial law? God, it's really it's really fucked up. Or on the other hand, you have people like his sister. You were like, can't we all just move on? That was like so long ago. The fact that they do that speaks a lot to why it's important to remember it. And today we'll talk about, the importance of public history to patriotism, why that's more important than forgetting, and why social interfaces has made it easy for us to forget that kind of stuff. You might think that I've discussed this before. I guess it's possible that I'll say a lot of things that I've already said before. But, if you're here to give it a listen, then, thanks, and let's dive into it together. Uh, History is integral to society. Because after all, we had to decide as people, like, you know what? From now on, societies exist. From now on, communities exist. And you know what? Their communities are different from each other. So people have to actively look for things that will differentiate their society and define it compared to other ones. And history is one of those things. History is an active act. We actively bring things from the past to the present. We actively remember and tell ourselves that we're going to recall these images, these feelings, the implications that it had. So that action helps bind people together. History, though, is also politics and knowledge and culture, because history affects the way that we are, affects the way that society is. The reason that society believes things the way it does, the reason that a society has, the political leanings, the infrastructure that it does, all relies on history. The Philippines wouldn't be a Catholic country if we weren't colonized, for example. That's part of our history. We wouldn't have a society of such deep-seated corruption if corruption didn't become like a regular thing over half a century ago. These are the things that define our values as a society and define what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. The way that we perceive people now is based on actions that they've done in the past, but likewise the political standings now are decided on political standings in the past. The Philippines has always been an oligarchy. The families that are powerful now were the same families that were powerful after the Japanese occupation, after the American occupation, and after the Spanish occupation. These are families that have been powerful forever, and it's their history that defines that power, not the democracy that we think, allows us to place them there. At the end of the day, of course, history is knowledge, history is fact, right? We have opinions about those facts, but it's based on fact. Technology. How does technology come into it? So technology helps us recall these images in society. As I said, since history is an active act, an active recollection, we recall, that process has evolved over the years. It used to be purely oral, O-R-A-L, like it used to be purely through telling stories. And then, of course, it went to print. People write things down so that they can remember it, and then it, went on to multimedia like television. And now we have social media. Social media now also doesn't just allow for the active reproduction of those images over and over and over. It also allows, again, people to put in their own perspectives, their own personal histories. It makes history a public domain. So we've discussed that before. I'm not gonna rehash it. And that is why historical erasure has both intellectual and practical effects. So people feel like communication and the digital interfaces are utopian, that they can only do good things for society, but of course we on this video series know better than that. And the same is true about how it hurts and helps history. We have to admit that sometimes we read history with a lack of understanding of what history is, in the same way that, like, we watch news and we feel like it must be completely unbiased, even though all news is biased. It's the same thing about history, right? History isn't necessarily utopian, it's not completely black or white. Again, it's presented as perspective, and a lot of people don't actually have the vocabulary or the critical tools to be able to really assess history as it's presented on the digital media, especially as it's presented a lot from so many sources, from so many sides. The people like the Marcoses try to abuse this. They try to abuse the fact that we read history backwards and not just forwards. Since we actively recall it, you know, they can always just like wedge a certain idea into our heads and say like, maybe we're recalling it wrong, maybe we should be looking at something else. The Marcoses have a lot of power. They have financial power, they have political power, they have powerful friends. They have a lot of power. That's how they're able to pay all of these people to go onto their sides, and that's how they're able to still be in politics despite how they fucking raped our country back and forth during the martial law years. What they don't have, and what they really desire, is that cultural power, that the ability to be able to fully suppress the past and to be able to fully say that now to be Filipino is to believe in the Marcoses. That's what they want, and that's what they're trying to do. They want that cultural power that will really allow them to rewrite history. They abuse the fact that now anybody can write anything. They pay micro-influencers, for example, who don't have small influence in a big circle, but strong influence in a small circle, and they pay them to be able to actively recall images that are in their favor. And this is important because it gives them cultural hegemony. It gives them power over our cultural narratives and our cultural values that define our country and that define ourselves as Filipinos. They use imagery via overwhelmingly paid trolls. They write all these paragraph-long posts. Otherwise, they have just like simple graphics that like have people like Lenny Robredo or their political opposition just like, I don't know, like really ugly or like quotes taken out of context. And like, you know, on our side, we might laugh and say like, oh, that's obviously Photoshop or whatever. But, you know, to their side, it's just like a very galvanizing thing. This is the most important thing. They reproduce this in as many places as possible. Again, because history and culture is the reproduction of images, they try to make sure that these are in as many places as possible. It's not just Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. They're going to all sorts of weird places, right? They establish their own websites. They have change.org petitions. They're trying to be in as many places as possible to look like the majority, because if they look like the majority, then people will begin to think that they are the majority. That's why Marcos being a Milo Olympics little whatever champion, which was pointed out by my friend Chris De Vera, the reason why that kind of sneaks its way onto its website is because it's not about the fact that you're going to read like all of these little bits. It's about the fact that when you look from afar, it looks like he's done a lot. And that's the image that you need, and that's the image that needs to spread, the image that he does a lot. And that's the reason why, yeah, it's very easy to just misquote their political opposition, because it's not about the context for them, it's just about the soundbite. Okay, I got really mad. Maybe it's the blue lipstick. But yeah, so of course, my first thing is if you're Filipino, you should vote, and don't vote for the Marcoses. Unless I don't know, they outright say like, I'm sorry, we were evil and we tried to suppress that. They won't. They never will. Recognize that history and imagery have power, and actively recall history. Don't forget history. I know maybe for you, history was a really boring subject in school. I'm sorry about that. But it's very important to who we are as Filipinos, as individuals, that we don't forget the histories that made us. Facts are immutable, facts can't be changed, but history can be changed, and the Marcoses are trying to change it, and we can't allow that to happen. It's not enough for you to know that certain things are false. You have to be able to use the power at your disposal. You have to be able to use the education that you have, the digital literacy that you have, to counter fake narratives. You're part of this fight, and I actively encourage you to do as much as you can with it. So, that's it. That was a lot. But yeah, thanks for joining me on my usual anti-Marcos hate train. If Marcos or a Marcos supporter is listening, then I would love to see you actually crack open a book about martial law or meet a martial law victim. Wouldn't that be cool if we had like Sandro Marcos talking to a martial law victim about what they went through and actually listening? Wouldn't that be more representative of what makes a leader than whatever the fuck is going on right now? Subscribe or don't. I hope this helps. If you're not Filipino, I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll create videos that are less about the Marcoses soon enough. And yeah, have a good day. If it's the Happy New Year, then happy 2022. We survived. And yeah, thanks to you guys for listening.